Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to do a little experiment that I've been working on here for probably about the last 4 or 5 days. So here I have 2 steaks, and you can't see them very well, but I'll go ahead and show you a better picture of them as I talk here. This steak right here is already cooked, believe it or not. Looks raw. It has some salt and it has a little bit of garlic powder, and that's it. This steak right here is completely raw. And it also has some salt and a little bit of garlic powder. Well, the experiment comes to see which one of these steaks has a better texture and a better taste once I reheat the one that's already cooked and completely cook the one that's still raw. Where are you getting at here, AP? Are you going nuts or something? Well, what I did, ladies and gentlemen, is I believe you saw a payday prep that I did maybe a couple of weeks back where I purchased a couple of New York strip loins, where it was the entire slab of New York strip at Costco. I purchased 2 of those, and what I did with them is, as you can see here, I cut them up into nice about 1 inch or so thick pieces, and with one of those slabs I went ahead and trimmed all the fat and put all of the meat on my freeze dryer trays and freeze dried them raw. And once it was done being freeze dried in the raw form, I went ahead and vacuum sealed them, and I left one out that I vacuum sealed in one individual packet so that we can go ahead and use it today for our test. The second batch that I did was the exact same thing as I did the first time, but before I freeze dried it, I went ahead and cooked all of the steaks. And just like I did with the batch that was raw, I kept one to the side so that we can see which one is better to store for long term. Now, we all know that when we freeze dry something, the macros and micronutrients in that food, they're pretty much well preserved, all the way up to 98% for 25, if not more years. So now that we know in the times that we live that there is pretty much a war against meat, and that the powers that be want us to consume less meat, whether we want to or not, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the time that we need to be stocking up on meat, if you eat meat, for the long term. So we're going to go ahead and take the piece of meat that is raw first and cook it up. I'm going to use my little Genesis stove here that we have here, and the pan that I'm using here already has some beef fat in it because I used it last night to cook some beef in it. I just kept the beef fat in it so that we can use it today in order to hopefully put a little bit of fat back into the meat, because you can see here that we trimmed all the fat off of these 2 steaks. And for those of you that may be asking, AP, what did you do with all of the trimmed fat that you have? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I definitely did not throw it away, and no, I did not give it to the dogs. I went ahead and I took all of my trimmed fat and I put it in a slow cooker. I set the slow cooker to high for several hours, and then when most of the fat had been rendered off, I went ahead and put it on low, and I let it simmer until there was a whole bunch of crispies that were very tasty, by the way, and I was left with this beautiful clean tallow that I can use to cook lean pieces of meat later on if I have a steak that's not very fatty. And for those of you that don't have one of these Genesis stoves, these Jetboil Genesis stoves, they are awesome. They're like the same thing as having a regular range in your home, same thing as the burners on a regular range. These go up to 10,000 BTU each. I think it's just such a nice stove to have that can actually act as a full range stove. If you bought 2 of these, you would have 4 burners, and this little stove right here is the same as having like a full range in your house, of course with the exception of the oven. And ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that ask how long does propane last, well, first of all, propane pretty much lasts forever. Okay, it'll outlive you as long as the container that it's being stored in, has its integrity, I guess you could say, right? But look, this propane here was packaged, it says there, I believe it's September 28th of 2012. That's when it was packaged. And I've had this thing forever, right? And it's going to work just fine. So in order to hook this up, it's very simple. You want to make sure that your bottle is going to be like this right here. You probably can't see the flame because it's light out, but it's definitely on, and I'm sure you can hear it though. And this little stove, it uses whatever technology they use, how they engineer the burner. It's kind of like a tornado, and it's very efficient. So let me go ahead and put the pan on first. Let me get all this tallow to melt, and then we're going to put our first steak on. The first one we're going to put on is the one that's not cooked yet. So as you can see here, it's a little bit lopsided, but that's because I'm on the back of my truck. I think you all noticed that already, right? That I'm on my tailgate. We're going to go ahead and put in our raw beef that we rehydrated, and you can see this is the one that we packaged because it's the one that's broken in half. Let's go ahead and throw it in there. Let's go ahead and cover it up, and we'll let it cook on each side for about 3-4 minutes each side. But we're going to go ahead and let it rest right there, and then we're going to put in our piece of meat that's already cooked, that was freeze-dried cooked. We're just going to put this on there for about 1.5 minutes on each side to make sure that it gets warmed up all the way through and it gets a little bit of a crust, and then we'll be done with this. Look at who showed up. Huh, girl? You want some? You want some? You want to treat him? Speak? Good girl. They always show up when they smell that meat for some reason, ladies and gentlemen. This is looking pretty good. Look at that. And we should be done. Let's turn this off. So if I were to complain about cooking on this stove, it cooks great. I mean, it heats great, but the other burner gets dirty. So in the future, if I'm only going to use one burner, especially to cook with grease like I was cooking now, I'll just cover this one up, because now I'm going to have to clean this up before I put it away. Whereas if I would have covered it up with something like the lid of a pan, I could have covered it up with that, and then I would have just washed the lid in the sink instead of having to come out here and mess with this out here. But that's all done. It did a great job. Here is our meat. There is our raw that we rehydrated, and here was our cooked freeze-dried steak that we rehydrated. This one is going to be the first one up because it's been resting for about 4 or 5 minutes now, so let's give it a try. Ladies and gentlemen, especially for those of you that may be new to the channel, I've often reminded you and will remind you in the future that I am a one-man crew, so I apologize for the production value, all right, because I'm not sure if the camera angle works this way or anything like that, but hopefully you can see it okay. There you go. That's what it looks like. It actually looks pretty appetizing, and I'm very curious to see how well it's cooked in the inside. And today we will be featuring a little K-bar foldable knife. I think I paid like 10 bucks for this, if not less, several years ago, and it is still kicking, ladies and gentlemen. It's turned out to be a really nice knife. Let's go ahead and cut this in the middle. This is the thickest part, so we'll see what this looks like in the middle. Oh wow, the middle is still a little bit bloody, and it actually looks like the middle, this might have still needed a little more time in the water. Look at that. It looks like it's still somewhat dry in the middle. Interesting. Let's see what it tastes like. I'll tell you what, that was a little bit dry, but man, it's very tasty. It has very good taste, so I'm glad that it tastes good. I would say that freeze drying it raw and then cooking it afterwards, after you rehydrate it, I think that's a winner. But we still have to taste the other one that was freeze-dried cook. Now, what I would do in the future with this raw one is I would obviously let it soak in water, probably for twice as much time as it did before. And this time also, the next time I do it, I would like poke it with a fork to poke a whole bunch of little holes in it so that the water can penetrate all the way to the middle. But as far as taste, it tastes great. The one thing is that if you're going to put away these kinds of meats for long term, ladies and gentlemen, especially in the freeze-dried form, remember that they're going to be pretty lean. So you're going to have to make sure that you put away fats, all right? I'm going to go ahead and try a piece of the thinner side of that same steak, and I'm going to dip it in the fat that's in the pan, and let's see how that tastes. And this is after I dipped it in the fat. And I'll tell you what, that's very tasty, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give the other one a try. Wow, this one feels a lot more tender. And look at that, it looks like it absorbed the water a lot better than the other one did. And I had these in the water for the same amount of time. I'm going to try this one without dipping it in fat, and then I'm going to try a piece dipping it in fat. Let's see what this one tastes like. That, ladies and gentlemen, was a lot better. That was a lot better. I have to say that the first one, the one that was freeze-dried raw, I have to say that I'm at fault. I probably overcooked it a bit too much, and I did not allow it to rehydrate long enough, in my opinion, right? But this one here, that bite that I had, it was really, really good, nice and tender. The only thing is I probably should have left it on the fire a little longer so it can get a little warmer. It's not really, really super hot like the other one was at first, but it tastes great. And the texture is really good. The texture is probably a lot closer to original texture of just taking a steak and frying it and then eating it than the first one was, the one that I freeze-dried raw. So I think that I know which way I'm going to be going in the future as far as freeze-drying meats raw or cooking them first and then freeze-drying them. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say that the experiment, I think, turned out really well. The meat that was cooked first and then freeze-dried, that, in my opinion, is the way to go. However, the one that wasn't cooked and it was freeze-dried raw, if you were to do that, I would just recommend that when you rehydrate it, to leave it in there for at least 5 or 6 hours, depending on how thick they are. The ones that I did were about an inch or so thick. So I would leave it in there for like 5, 6, 7 hours all day, because in reality, it can't soak up more water than what it really needs. Whenever it's done soaking up all the water it's going to soak up, then it's going to be done. It's not going to continue to soak it up like if it were a balloon, right? It's more than likely just going to soak it up like a sponge. And once it can't hold anymore, then that's it. It can't hold anymore. So it's not like you can ruin it. So that's what I would do next time. And now let's see Karma, where are you at? I knew Karma was right there. Look at that. She's waiting for a little treat. Let's see if we can make her do a trick, okay? Give me your paw. Good girl. You're a good girl. You want a treat? There you go. Good girl. Now sit. Sit. Speak. No, sit. No, you got to sit. Sit. Speak. Good girl. There you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you got something out of this. Put away the meats, ladies and gentlemen, if you eat meat, because I believe that in the future, just like last year coming into this year, meat was a little more expensive as far as finding a floor. Remember, meat's found a new floor, and that floor is higher than what it used to be in the past. Sure, the price of meat has come down a little bit, but it will never go back down to what it used to be a few years ago. When I first started buying ribeye at Costco, it used to be about $6.99, $7.99 a pound, and I thought that was ridiculous. Now you're lucky if you can find it for less than $13.99, $14 a pound. Yes, it's gone as high as $19.99, $20.99, but it's settled down and found a new floor that's a lot higher than what it used to be. So put away your meats now. And if you don't freeze dry, if you don't have a freeze dryer, you can always do pressure canning, ladies and gentlemen. You can always put away jerky like Billy and Dee do from Frontier Preppers. There's different ways to do it. Find the way that best works for you. Having said that, God bless every one of you. God bless America. I'm Alaska Prepper. I am out.